David sat in his usual corner of the coffee shop, staring at his laptop screen without really seeing it. The cursor blinked at him, waiting for him to type something, anything. But his mind was somewhere else, or maybe it was nowhere at all. That was the problem these days. He felt like he was just going through the motions, living life on autopilot. It was Tuesday morning, and the rain was coming down hard outside. He could hear it drumming against the windows, creating a steady rhythm that should have been soothing, but somehow just made him feel more alone. The coffee shop was packed with people escaping the weather, all of them hunched over their phones or laptops, living in their own little worlds. David took a sip of his coffee. It had gone cold, but he drank it anyway. That pretty much summed up his life lately. Everything was just fine, not good, not bad, just fine. And somehow that felt worse than if things were actually terrible. He'd been coming to this same coffee shop every Tuesday for the past 2 years. Same table, same coffee order, same playlist in his earbuds. The barista Jenny didn't even ask for his order anymore. She just started making it when she saw him walk in. Last week she'd made a joke about how she could set her watch by him. Everyone had laughed, including David, but the comment had stuck with him like a splinter under his skin. His ex-girlfriend, the one he'd dated for 3 years, used to say things like that too. "You're so predictable, David," she'd say, not in a mean way, just like she was stating a fact. "You never surprise me anymore." When they broke up 6 months ago, it had been mutual. They'd sat on his couch, had a calm adult conversation about how they'd grown apart, and that was that. No drama, no tears, just nothing. And that was the problem. He felt nothing. Not about the breakup, not about his job, not about anything, really. He was 32 years old, working as a software developer, making decent money, living in a nice apartment. On paper, everything looked great. But inside he felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the parts of him that used to get excited about things. His best friend, the one he'd known since college, kept trying to get him to go out more. "You need to meet new people," he'd say. "Get back out there, man. You can't just sit in coffee shops forever." But David didn't want to get back out there. The whole dating app thing felt exhausting. Swiping through faces, having the same conversations over and over. "What do you do? Where are you from? What are your hobbies?" It all felt so pointless. The truth was, David had become comfortable in his numbness. It was safe. If you didn't feel anything, nothing could hurt you. If you kept your life predictable and routine, there were no surprises, no disappointments. He'd built himself a nice little fortress of habits and schedules, and inside that fortress, he was protected from everything, including actually living. He glanced around the coffee shop. There was a college student in the corner, frantically typing what looked like a paper that was probably due in an hour. An older couple sat by the window, reading newspapers and occasionally showing each other articles. A businessman was on his phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones about some deal that was falling through. All these lives, all these stories, happening right around him, and David felt separate from all of it, like he was watching the world through a thick pane of glass. The rain picked up outside, and David suddenly realized he'd forgotten his umbrella. Again, 3rd time this month. He'd have to make a run for it when he left, get soaked, go home to his empty apartment, change into dry clothes, and then what? Watch TV, play video games, order takeout. The same thing he did every night. His laptop pinged with a notification. Work email. Someone needed him to review some code. He clicked on it, scanned through the message, typed a quick response. Professional, efficient, detached. That was David. Always reliable, never exciting. Jenny walked by his table, picking up empty cups. "You doing okay, David?" she asked. "You've been staring at that same screen for like an hour." "Yeah, I'm good," he lied automatically. "Just thinking through some code." She nodded and moved on, and David wondered if anyone could tell that he was lying. Could people see how empty he felt inside, or was he good enough at pretending that nobody noticed? His phone buzzed. A text from his friend. "Drinks tonight? You can't say no. I won't let you." David started typing out an excuse, then stopped. Maybe he should go. Maybe sitting alone in his apartment one more night would actually break him. He typed back, "Maybe. Let me see how work goes." It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. But it was enough to buy him some time, to put off making any real decision. The Wi-Fi suddenly cut out, and David's screen went blank. He tried refreshing, clicking around, but nothing worked. For the first time that morning, he actually looked up from his laptop. Really looked up. He saw the coffee shop around him, heard the conversations, noticed the art on the walls that he'd walked past 100 times without ever really seeing. There was a painting near his table, something abstract with bright colors swirling together. He had no idea how long it had been there. Could have been days, could have been years. That's how much attention he paid to the world around him these days. David closed his laptop with a soft click. The Wi-Fi would come back eventually. Or it wouldn't. Either way, he wasn't getting any real work done today. His mind was too foggy, too stuck in this loop of thoughts about how his life had become this predictable, comfortable, suffocating routine. He thought about his ex again, about the last real conversation they'd had. She'd told him that she felt like she was dating a ghost of the person she'd fallen in love with. "You used to have dreams, David," she'd said. "You used to talk about traveling, about taking risks, about really living. Now you just exist. And I can't watch you disappear like this anymore." At the time, he'd thought she was being dramatic. But sitting here now, 6 months later, he wondered if she'd been right. When was the last time he'd felt truly excited about something? When was the last time he'd done something spontaneous? Something that scared him a little, something that made him feel alive? He couldn't remember. The rain continued to fall outside, and David continued to sit in his corner, surrounded by people but feeling completely alone. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change. In about 5 minutes, someone would walk through that door, shake the rain from her hair, and completely turn his world upside down. But for now, he was just David, a man who'd forgotten how to feel anything real, sitting in a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday, waiting for something he couldn't even name. The door burst open, bringing with it a gust of wind and rain. David looked up, and that's when he saw her for the first time. She was laughing as she stumbled through the door, completely soaked, her dark hair plastered to her face. She had a large portfolio case tucked under one arm and was trying to shake water off herself with the other hand, which only seemed to make things worse. Instead of looking frustrated or upset like most people would, she was genuinely amused by her situation. "Well, that's what I get for believing a weather app," she said to no one in particular, her voice carrying across the coffee shop. A few people looked up and smiled. She had that kind of energy, the kind that made strangers want to smile back. David found himself watching her as she made her way to the counter. She was dressed professionally, but everything was now rain-soaked. She set down her portfolio case carefully, checking to make sure it was dry, then ordered her coffee with the kind of warmth that made it seem like she and Jenny were old friends, even though David had never seen her here before. The coffee shop was packed. Every single table was full. The woman looked around, her coffee in hand, clearly searching for a place to sit. Her eyes scanned the room, and David suddenly became very aware that he was sitting at a table meant for 4 people, using only one chair. Their eyes met across the crowded room. She smiled, hesitant, and started making her way toward him. David felt something strange in his chest, something he hadn't felt in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Nervousness? Anticipation? Whatever it was, it cut through the fog he'd been living in. "Hey," she said, stopping at his table. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but is anyone sitting here?" She gestured to the empty chairs around him. "No, go ahead," David said, surprised by how normal his voice sounded when his heart was suddenly beating faster. "You're a lifesaver," she said, setting down her coffee and carefully placing her portfolio case on the floor beside her chair. "I have a client meeting in 20 minutes and I needed somewhere to dry off and mentally prepare." She laughed again, pushing wet hair back from her face. "Though I'm not sure showing up looking like a drowned rat is the professional image I was going for." David found himself smiling, a real smile that actually reached his eyes. "The weather report said it would be sunny today, right?" she said, pulling out her phone to check the time. "I trusted technology, and technology betrayed me. Story of the modern age." She glanced at his laptop. "Sorry, I'm not interrupting your work, am I? I can be quiet. I'm just going to sit here and pretend I'm not panicking about this meeting." "You're not interrupting," David said. And he meant it. For the first time in months, he was actually interested in talking to someone. "Big meeting?" "New client," she explained, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "Could be a really good contract, but I'm freelance, so every new client feels like my entire career is on the line." She laughed nervously. "Listen to me, dumping my anxiety on a complete stranger. Sorry, I tend to overshare when I'm nervous. It's okay, David said. I'm David by turns out. Elena, she said, extending her hand across the table. When their hands met, David felt that strange sensation in his chest again, stronger this time. They started talking, and David was amazed at how easy it was. Elena had a way of asking questions that actually made him think about his answers, instead of just giving automatic responses. When she asked what he did for work and he said he was a software developer, she didn't just nod and move on. She wanted to know what kind of software, whether he enjoyed it, what got him into coding in the first place. I actually wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kid, David found himself admitting, something he hadn't thought about in years. I was obsessed with the ocean, with discovering things nobody had seen before. What changed? Elena asked, genuinely curious. David shrugged. I guess I just took the practical path. Good grades in math, people said I should do computer science, it paid well. So that's what I did? Elena tilted her head, studying him. Do you ever miss it? The ocean thing? I don't know, David said honestly. I haven't really thought about it in a long time. They discovered they'd both gone to the same university, though Elena was 3 years younger and had studied graphic design. She told him about her journey to freelancing, how terrifying it was to leave a stable job and strike out on her own, but how she couldn't imagine going back now. Don't get me wrong, she said. There are days when I'm absolutely panicking about money, or whether I'm good enough or if I've made a huge mistake. But then I have a day where I create something I'm really proud of, or a client loves what I've done, and it makes all the scary parts worth it. David realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt proud of something he'd created. He wrote code, it worked, he moved on to the next thing. There was no passion in it, no sense of accomplishment, just tasks to check off a list. What about you? Elena asked. Are you happy? With your work, I mean. It was such a simple question, but it caught David completely off guard. Nobody asked him that. People asked if work was busy, if he had any interesting projects, but nobody asked if he was actually happy. I don't know, he said slowly. I haven't really thought about it. Elena looked at him with something like understanding in her eyes. Can I tell you something? She said. And don't take this the wrong way because I literally just met you. But you seem like someone who's going through the motions. I recognize it because I used to be like that too. Going to a job I didn't hate but didn't love. Dating someone I cared about but wasn't crazy about. Living a perfectly fine life that felt like it was slowly suffocating me. David stared at her, stunned by how accurately she'd just described his existence. What changed? He asked quietly. I got scared, Elena said simply. I looked at my life one day and realized I was 27 years old and couldn't name a single thing I was excited about. Not one thing. And I thought, if I keep living like this, I'm going to wake up at 50 and realize I never actually lived at all. So I quit my job, ended a relationship that was comfortable but not right, and decided to figure out what would make me actually feel alive. Was it hard? David asked. Terrifying, Elena admitted. But you know what was scarier? The idea of staying where I was. They talked for nearly an hour until Elena's phone alarm went off, reminding her about her meeting. She looked genuinely disappointed. I have to go, she said, gathering her things. But this was really nice. Thank you for letting me share your table and for listening to me ramble about life philosophy to a stranger. It was nice for me too, David said, and he meant it more than he'd meant anything in a long time. Elena stood up, slinging her portfolio case over her shoulder. Then she hesitated, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The coffee shop was loud with conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine, and rain still drumming against the windows. She leaned forward across the small table, close enough that David could smell rain and vanilla and something floral. In the noisy chaos of the coffee shop, her voice dropped to a whisper. David, she said softly, his name on her lips sending an unexpected shiver through him. Can I get your number? I'd really like to talk to you again. Time seemed to slow down. Her face was inches from his, her dark eyes looking directly into his. In that moment, with her whispering his name in a crowded coffee shop, David felt something crack open inside him. That numbness he'd been living with for months suddenly split apart, and underneath was something raw and real and absolutely terrifying. He forgot about his laptop. He forgot about his cold coffee. He forgot about his routine and his safe, predictable life. All he knew was this moment, this person, this feeling of finally waking up after a long, dreamless sleep. "Yes," he managed to say. "Yeah, definitely." Elena smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face, and pulled out her phone. They exchanged numbers, and then she was gone, rushing out into the rain to make her meeting. David sat back down, staring at his blank laptop screen. He had no idea how long he sat there, but when he finally looked at the time, an hour had passed. He hadn't written a single line of code. He hadn't checked his email. He just sat there, replaying the conversation in his mind, thinking about the way she'd leaned close and whispered his name. For the first time in 6 months, David felt something. And it was wonderful and terrifying all at once. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of text messages and phone calls and stolen moments between meetings. David found himself smiling at his phone like a teenager, checking for messages from Elena every few minutes. His coworkers started commenting on it. "What's got you in such a good mood?" his colleague asked one afternoon when David was actually laughing at his desk. "Just life," David said vaguely, not ready to explain about Elena to anyone yet. He wanted to keep this new, fragile thing to himself for a while longer. They met for coffee again that Friday. Elena showed up with paint stains on her hands and apologies about running late from a project. She slid into the seat across from him, ordering the same coffee as before, and immediately launched into a story about her client meeting from earlier that week. "It went so well," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "They loved the designs and they want me to do their entire rebrand. It's the biggest project I've landed since going freelance." "That's amazing," David said, genuinely happy for her. Her enthusiasm was infectious. "I know." She grinned. "I literally did a happy dance in my apartment when I got the email. My neighbor probably thinks I've lost my mind." They talked for 3 hours that day, until the coffee shop was getting ready to close. Then Elena suggested they walk, even though it was getting dark and a bit chilly. They ended up wandering through a park David passed every day but had never actually walked through. Elena noticed everything. She pointed out interesting architecture on buildings, stopped to look at street art, chatted easily with a hot dog vendor about his recommendations. She moved through the world like someone who was actually participating in it, not just passing through it like David had been doing. "Have you always been like this?" David asked as they walked. "Like what?" "So present, so engaged with everything." Elena laughed. "No, not always. That was part of what I had to learn. I used to walk around with my headphones in, completely in my own head, barely noticing anything around me. Then one day my friend challenged me to walk through the city without my phone, without music, just paying attention. It was actually kind of amazing what I noticed when I wasn't distracted." "Like what?" David asked. "Like how there's this tiny bookstore on 5th Street that only sells poetry, or how the guy who works at the corner market has the most incredible smile, or how the light hits the buildings at sunset in this way that makes the whole city look gold." She glanced at him. "I know it sounds cheesy, but once I started actually looking at the world around me, I couldn't stop. There's so much beauty in ordinary things if you pay attention." David thought about his own walks through the city, how he always had his headphones in, how he took the same route every day without really seeing any of it. He thought about all the things he'd probably walked past without noticing. They ended up at a late-night food truck that Elena swore had the best tacos in the city. They sat on a park bench eating tacos and talking about everything and nothing. David told her about his family, about growing up in a small town and moving to the city for college. Elena told him about her childhood, about her parents who'd always encouraged her creativity, even when it wasn't practical. "They never pushed me to have a backup plan," she said. "They just believed I could make art work as a career. I'm really lucky that way." "My parents wanted me to be a doctor," David admitted. "When I said I was doing computer science, they were disappointed it wasn't medicine, but at least it was stable and respectable." "Do you think that's why you chose it?" Elena asked gently. "Because it was what they wanted?" David had never really thought about it that way. "Maybe partly, but I don't know. It seemed like the smart choice." "Safe choice," Elena corrected softly. "There's a difference." Over the next week, Elena introduced David to parts of the city he'd never explored. An art gallery opening where they drank cheap wine and looked at abstract paintings that David didn't understand, but Elena explained with such passion that he found himself getting interested anyway. A tiny jazz club where a live band played and Elena pulled him onto the dance floor, even though David insisted he couldn't dance. "Nobody here cares if you can dance," she laughed, swaying to the music. "Just move. Feel it." David felt ridiculous at first, but as he watched Elena moving unselfconsciously to the music, her eyes closed and a smile on her face, something shifted in him. He stopped worrying about looking stupid and just moved. And she was right. It felt good to just let go. Another night she took him to a rooftop garden he didn't even know existed in the middle of the city. They lay on their backs looking at stars that were barely visible through the light pollution, and Elena told him about her dream to travel to all 7 continents before she turned 40. "What about you?" she asked, turning her head to look at him. "If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?" "Japan," David said without hesitation, surprising himself. He hadn't thought about Japan in years. "Yeah?" Elena's face lit up. "Why Japan?" "I don't know exactly," David said slowly. "I've just always been drawn to it. The culture, the food, the mix of traditional and modern. I used to read books about it when I was younger, looked at photos online. I always told myself I'd go someday. So why haven't you?" Elena asked simply. It was such a straightforward question, but David found himself struggling to answer it. Why hadn't he gone? He had vacation days. He had money saved. What was stopping him? "I guess I just never made it a priority," he said finally. Elena was quiet for a moment, still looking at him in the darkness. "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if I'm overstepping?" "Okay," David said, feeling nervous suddenly. "Do you think you've been waiting for permission to live your life? Like waiting for the right moment or the right circumstances? Or for someone to tell you it's okay to do the things you actually want to do?" Her words hit David like a physical blow. He stared up at the barely visible stars, feeling something crack open inside him. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think maybe I have been." Elena reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. It was the first time they'd held hands, and the simple gesture made David's heart race. "You don't need permission," she said softly. "You just need to decide that your life is worth living fully." They lay there in silence for a while, hands intertwined, and David felt something shifting inside him. Being with Elena was like being given permission to want things again, to feel things again. She made him remember the person he used to be, the person who'd had dreams and passions before he'd buried them under routine and safety. As the weeks went on, David found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. He told Elena about his failed relationship, about how he'd felt nothing when it ended, about how worried he'd been that maybe he was broken somehow, incapable of feeling deeply. "You're not broken," Elena said firmly. They were back at the coffee shop, their coffee shop now, sitting at what had become their table. "You were protecting yourself." "It's different." "From what?" David asked. "From being hurt again. From being disappointed. From failing." Elena stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "But here's the thing about protecting yourself from pain. You also protect yourself from joy. You can't selectively numb yourself. When you shut down the bad feelings, you shut down the good ones too." David knew she was right. He'd spent so long trying to keep himself safe that he'd stopped really living. But now sitting across from Elena, feeling his heart race every time she smiled at him, he was terrified. Because the thing he hadn't told her yet, the thing he was afraid to admit even to himself, was that he was falling in love with her, fast and hard and completely. And that was the most unsafe thing he could possibly do. One evening, as they walked along the river, Elena got quiet. David noticed she'd been checking her phone more than usual. "Everything okay?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something. I got an offer today. A really big offer." David's stomach dropped, though he tried to keep his face neutral. "That's good, right?" "It's a 3-month contract in Barcelona," Elena said. "Working with this incredible design firm on a major international campaign. It's the kind of opportunity that could really launch my career to the next level." "That sounds amazing," David said, meaning it even as his heart sank. "You should absolutely take it." Elena stopped walking and turned to face him. "David, we've been seeing each other for 2 weeks. I know that's not a long time, but..." She trailed off, looking uncertain for the first time since he'd met her. "But what?" David asked softly. "But this feels like something real," she said. "And I don't know if I want to leave when something real is just starting." Every instinct David had was screaming at him to tell her not to go, to stay, to see where this could lead. But that old fear, that need to protect himself, rose up stronger. "When would you leave?" he asked instead. 2 weeks, Elena said. "The contract starts in 2 weeks. David felt panic rising in his chest. 2 weeks. They only had 2 weeks, and then she'd be gone. And this perfect bubble they'd been living in would pop, and he'd be right back where he started, alone and numb and safe. "You should go," he heard himself say. "This is an incredible opportunity. You can't pass this up." "Really?" Elena looked uncertain. "You think so?" "I do," David said, even though every word felt like a lie. "This is your career. This is important." The next 2 weeks should have been wonderful. They should have made the most of their remaining time together. But something had shifted after that conversation by the river, and David could feel Elena pulling back, confused by his reaction. He started declining some of her invitations. When she suggested going to a concert, he said he had too much work. When she wanted to try a new restaurant, he claimed he was tired. He told himself he was just preparing for the inevitable, making it easier when she left. But the truth was, he was running away. He was protecting himself before she could hurt him, even though she'd never given him any reason to think she would. Elena noticed. Of course she noticed. She confronted him one afternoon at the coffee shop, sitting across from him at their usual table with frustration and hurt in her eyes. "What are you doing, David?" she asked directly. "Ever since I told you about Barcelona, you've been pulling away. Did I do something wrong?" "No," David said quickly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Then what is it?" Elena's voice was softer now. "Talk to me." David wanted to tell her the truth. He wanted to say that he was falling in love with her, and the thought of her leaving terrified him. But the words stuck in his throat. "I just think maybe we should be realistic," he said instead. "You're leaving in a week. Long distance is hard. Maybe it's better if we just don't make this complicated." Elena stared at him, and he watched as understanding dawned in her eyes, and then hurt, and then anger. "You're giving up before we even try," she said. "You're running away because you're scared." "I'm being practical," David argued, even as he knew it was a lie. "No, you're being a coward," Elena said, and her words cut deep because they were true. "I thought you were different, David. I thought you were starting to actually live again. But you're just reverting back to the same safe, scared person you were when I met you." "Maybe that's who I really am," David said defensively. "I don't believe that," Elena said, but her voice was softer now, almost sad. "I've seen who you can be. I've seen you laugh and take risks and actually feel things, but you're choosing to bury that person again because it's safer." They sat in silence for a long moment. The coffee shop buzzed around them with other people's conversations, other people's lives, while theirs fell apart. "I was going to ask you something today," Elena finally said. "I was going to ask if you wanted to come visit me in Barcelona. I was going to tell you that even though 3 months apart would be hard, I thought what we had was worth fighting for." She paused. "But I can't fight for this alone, David. If you're not willing to take any risk at all, if you're just going to run away at the first sign of things getting hard, then maybe you're right. Maybe we should just end this now." David wanted to tell her she was wrong. He wanted to tell her he'd visit, that they'd make it work, that he was willing to fight for this. But that old fear had him in its grip, and he couldn't make the words come out. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I think you're right. You should go to Barcelona and focus on your career. You deserve someone who can give you what you need." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "What I need is someone brave enough to actually feel something. Someone who won't run away the second things get complicated." She stood up, gathering her bag. "I thought that was you, David. I really did." "Elena, wait." David started, but she was already walking away. "I hope you figure out what you really want someday," she said over her shoulder. "Before you push away everyone who actually cares about you." And then she was gone, the door closing behind her, leaving David alone at their table. The next few days were the worst of David's life. Worse than his breakup with his ex, worse than anything. Because this time he couldn't tell himself he felt nothing. He felt everything. He felt the loss of Elena like a physical ache. He felt regret so strong it made him nauseous. He felt anger at himself for being such an idiot. He went back to his old routine, but now it felt suffocating instead of safe. He sat in the coffee shop every Tuesday, but the table felt wrong without Elena across from him. He walked his usual route to work, but now he noticed all the things she'd pointed out to him. The bookstore, the street art, the way the light hit the buildings. And every single thing reminded him of what he'd lost. His best friend came over 3 days after David had pushed Elena away. He took one look at David's apartment, the takeout containers, the unmade bed, the general state of misery, and shook his head. "You're an idiot," his friend said bluntly. Sitting down on the couch, "Thanks," David muttered. "I'm serious. You met someone who clearly cared about you, who brought you back to life, and you pushed her away because you were scared. That's not being smart or practical, David. That's just being scared." "She's leaving for Barcelona," David said. "It would never have worked." "Says who?" his friend challenged. "Did you even try? Did you even have a conversation about what it might look like to make it work? Or did you just immediately assume it was impossible and give up?" David didn't answer because he knew his friend was right. "You know what your problem is?" his friend continued. "You're so busy protecting yourself from potential pain that you're guaranteeing yourself actual pain. You'd rather be miserable and safe than happy and vulnerable. What if I tried and it didn't work out?" David asked quietly. "What if I let myself care and she left anyway?" "Then you'd hurt," his friend said simply. "But you're hurting now anyway, aren't you? At least if you'd tried, you'd know you gave it a shot. Right now, you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you'd just been brave enough to try." Those words haunted David for the next 2 days. He kept playing his last conversation with Elena over and over in his mind, thinking about all the things he should have said instead. He thought about the first day they met, how she'd whispered his name and made him feel truly awake for the first time in months. He thought about lying on that rooftop looking at stars, holding her hand. He thought about dancing in that jazz club, feeling free and alive. He thought about every moment they'd shared, every conversation, every laugh, and he realized his friend was absolutely right. He was already hurting. The difference was, this pain came with regret. He'd chosen this pain by being too scared to choose happiness. Elena's flight to Barcelona was tomorrow morning. David knew this because she'd mentioned it before everything fell apart. He had less than 24 hours to decide what kind of person he wanted to be. Did he want to be the safe person who never got hurt but never really lived either? Or did he want to be the person Elena had helped him remember he could be? Someone who took risks, who felt deeply, who chose possibility over certainty. That night, David barely slept. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Around midnight, he made a decision. It was probably too late. Elena probably hated him. But he had to try. He couldn't let her leave without telling her the truth. He spent the rest of the night planning, his heart pounding with a mixture of terror and hope. By the time the sun started to rise, David had made up his mind. He was done being safe. He was done protecting himself from living. Whatever happened, at least he'd know he tried. David showed up at Elena's apartment at 11 p.m., his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. Her flight was at 8 a.m. the next morning. He was cutting this way too close. He knocked on her door, half expecting her not to answer. But after a long moment, the door opened, and there she was, looking tired and sad and beautiful. "David?" She looked surprised and